and there was a guy on that list who I was like, oh, cool, I'll check this guy out. This guy's blog out. Really liked the blog. Like, really, really smart guy. A lot of interesting perspectives. So I noticed that he lived, the same place that I live. And I said, you know what, like, who could I reach out to that might know him? So I go to Facebook, put his name in, and see, wow, there's like 6 people that I know who are friends with him on Facebook. So reach out to one of them and say, hey, I saw you're connected to so-and-so. How well do you know that person? And, would you mind if I actually, if you connected me to him? The person said, sure, that'd be great. Sure enough, email intro, and now, I've connected to that person. So, there's never really been that opportunity before in history to be able to reach out to people in that way. And I think that entrepreneurs in particular, and especially the successful entrepreneurs that I've seen, do a very good job of using Facebook, of using LinkedIn, of using Twitter to be able to connect with other people. And so that's something that I highly, highly recommend. Feel free to add me on Facebook, add me on Twitter if you'd like. Add each other on Facebook, add each other on Twitter. I think that anybody who's sitting in this room right now watching this class is probably somebody who is either an entrepreneur or has the aspirations of being an entrepreneur. They're probably somebody who's a pretty good person to know. So I definitely would recommend to connect to other people. I see a bunch of Twitter handles now being thrown in the chat box. That's awesome. Yeah, and definitely follow EduFire as well. So the last point around networking is build your network before you need it. And this is, something that I think is just so important, especially for those of you who say, I want to be an entrepreneur in the future, but I'm not an entrepreneur yet. Even if you don't have an idea, the one thing that you can do that will really help you in terms of being an entrepreneur is start building your network now. Reach out to cool people, reach out to fun people, reach out to interesting people, develop relationships. Because once you do have your idea, once you are ready to go, that is going to be incredibly valuable to you. And when I talk on college campuses, this is something that I really impress upon, people who might be in their teens or early 20s is, wow, like you might not be ready to start a company at 22. Most people aren't, but you definitely can build a big network. And especially when you're at college and you're around smart people and you can build great relationships. I think that it's one of those things that people oftentimes, like I didn't have much of a network at all until I was about 26 or 27 years old. And, I look back now and I'm like, wow, like, if I had started when I was 18 or started when I was 15, like, where would I be? And at the same time, like, some people don't learn it until they're in their 40s or 50s or 60s. And so, wherever you are, whatever your stage is, whatever your age is, this is a great time to really start to actively build your network. And again, come from that perspective of what can I give, not what can I get, connect other people, use social media. We had a private question to me, which was, can one be a part-time entrepreneur, or does one need to quit their job? That's actually a really good question, and I have different perspectives on that. I think it really depends on what you're doing. There are some things that simply require your full-time devotion to, and I think that if you feel that your business is one of those types of things, then absolutely, you just have to cut the cord. I think once you cut the cord, this amount of energy is just freed up that allows you to pour it into your endeavor. But at the same time, I've seen other perspectives which have said, you know what, like, start a company on the side, do something in your evenings and your weekends, and that can actually be really successful. It's how a lot of very successful companies have started. So I'll kind of leave it at that, but I'll recommend, and this is also in the handout, I'll recommend to read the book Founders at Work. It's a story of 30 different people who started companies, and it really tells a lot about their background. A lot of times business books tell you about what happened, like, to make them successful, like once they already had the company up and running, and talk more about their later years. Founders at Work does a really good job of talking about the early days. And what you'll notice in Founders at Work is it's fairly split between people who were working at a job and doing something on the side and turned whatever their sideline gig was into a company, and people who just simply cut the cord and did entrepreneurship full time. So the business is Founders at, or the website is Founders at Work. I just spelled founders. Yep, you got it. Thanks, Koichi. So definitely highly recommend. And Jacob, that's a great point too, is, it really depends on the stage of life that you're at, because, and I'll talk a little bit about this, I think it's actually in the next slide, which is the notion of managing your risk appropriately. And when you're young, you can afford to take big risks. You don't have kids, mortgage, lots of obligations. When you're older, that gets more challenging, and that's just the nature of life. And so I think that Jacob makes a really good point, which is, it definitely depends on at what stage you're at. So the next slide is take smart risks early and often. So I'm a big fan of risk taking. I think as an entrepreneur, you have to be a risk taker. I think the penalties for being a risk taker are smaller now than they've ever been. A lot of this is a cultural thing. It does depend on where you are. I've never lived in Europe, but I've heard in certain parts of Europe that there's actually a very big stigma that's placed upon people who are failed entrepreneurs, which we really don't have in the U.S. A little bit, but typically people in the U.S. who have had a company that's failed, oftentimes it's like a badge of honor. It's like, look what I've done. Like you saw that in my second slide, right? Like, look at the 3 companies that I messed up. So that's something that I really feel we, again, like many people discount, is we're in an age where taking those risks, the downside is certainly a lot less than it has been. And that's not to say there isn't downside. And again, if you're in a situation where you've got, wife, kids, husband, house, mortgage, all that stuff, absolutely. But I also think that sometimes the risks of not doing a company are a lot greater than people think. And if you've had an idea in your mind for 5 years and you're not leaving your job, which you hate because you're scared of the risks, like, to be honest, like, that's a bigger risk, the fact that you're not fully fulfilled. So that's something that I think people oftentimes kind of view differently. And a lot of it's just, the entrepreneurial mindset. Entrepreneurs tend to be risk takers. I'm sure if I was very risk averse, I wouldn't have started EduFire. I wouldn't be teaching this class right now. So, it does depend on the person, but I really do think that the costs of failure are typically smaller than you think. Another thing is, and this is just really, something that I gear more towards the younger audiences when I speak, is take risks early in life. There's less to lose. When you're 22, your opportunity cost is so low. When you're 18, your opportunity cost is so low. So if you are younger, really think about that. I think there's so much pressure when you are younger to get that really good job that your parents will approve of or whatever, and you really miss out on a golden opportunity. There's a couple of companies or organizations, one Y Combinator, another one called Techstars in Boulder, that really focus on supporting younger entrepreneurs. And I think it's such an amazing thing that they're doing this, because the time to start a company and the time actually to fail, if you're going to fail, is when you're really young, because then you can carry those lessons through the rest of your life. Your opportunity costs are lower, and you can bounce back more quickly. So I'd highly recommend, if you are young, take those risks soon. People will tell you not to, especially people who haven't taken risks in their own life, but I really do think that it makes sense when you think about it in kind of the big picture. And the final thing is read stories of risk takers. I'm a big fan of immersing myself in the material and the stories of people who've taken big risks. A great book, which I have here, is Richard Branson's book. And if you don't know Richard Branson, he started all the different Virgin brands, so Virgin Airlines and Virgin Records, and his book is aptly enough called Losing My Virginity. But tremendous risk taker, and when you read through some of the stories in the book and you realize, wow, he really did some things that were outside of the norm. I mean, it's not even just business stuff, but he'd fly blimps and hot air balloons and like all this crazy stuff, and he's just an absolute risk taker in every sense of the word. So that's a great example of a book. There's a number of other books that I've got in the handout. A lot of the blogs that I recommend, a lot of the podcasts you can listen to. You'll see this time and time again that there's a very high correlation between people that are avid risk takers and successful entrepreneurs. So. All right, and the last lesson that I have is to think holistically. So this is my health slide, and it's basically that there is more to life than certainly business success and money. And having said that, at the same time, the stuff that you do to improve your health will actually help you become a better entrepreneur. So, the kind of the mentality towards business often has been that if I'm going to become an entrepreneur, it's going to mean I can't sleep, it's going to mean I can't exercise, it's going to mean I have to eat pizza and drink Red Bull, and unfortunately that actually sets you up to not be an optimal entrepreneur. So one of the things that entrepreneurship has done for me is it's actually gotten me into studying what are the things that I can do to have more energy, to think more clearly, to be able to kind of show up better in the world. And it's exercise, it's eating properly, all those things. So I think what's great about being an entrepreneur is if you take that approach of looking at entrepreneurship as actually a means to make yourself a more holistic and more healthy person, it's actually a win-win situation. And I definitely